A single shaft of golden morning light pierced the delicate lace curtain, tracing its trembling path across the slender fingers of Isabel de la Torre. She sat poised at the window, her embroidery needle dancing in and out of ivory linen, though her mind drifted far from the faded blooms she stitched. The hush of the great house pressed in around her, broken only by the faint echo of carriage wheels on distant gravel and the clipped steps of her mother, Doña Mercedes, advancing down the corridor with purpose sharpened by worry. Isabel glanced up, heart fluttering. The hush was deceptive, heavy with the weight of their circumstances. Faded brocade, silver candlesticks grown dull, the hush of servants treading carefully in rooms that once bustled with laughter. The grandeur of the De la Torre name was all that remained intact. In its shadow, Isabel bent her dreams to silence. Doña Mercedes entered, her silk skirts whispering secrets to the floor. Her presence filled the room. Her bearing, still regal, masked the desperation that haunted her eyes. "Isabel," she began, her voice as crisp as the morning, "I hope your work is nearly finished. Today must be perfect." Isabel set down her embroidery, smoothing the linen with gentle hands. "Yes, madre. Is there news?" "There is always news." Doña Mercedes crossed to the window, looking out as if searching the gravel drive for salvation. "You know how precarious our position is. This house, these lands, our name, they mean little without the fortune to sustain them. Reputation is our last defense, Isabel. It must not falter." The words, though softly spoken, fell heavy between them. Isabel's throat tightened. She watched her mother's reflection in the glass, proud, unyielding, yet lined with fatigue. "I understand, madre." Doña Mercedes turned, her gaze softening. "I have arranged for a visit from Don Rodrigo. He is of noble birth, well respected, and his family's estate is secure." "He is the right match, Isabel. The only match." A shadow flickered in Isabel's chest. Don Rodrigo. She remembered him only as a distant figure at garden parties, courteous but cold, his laughter hollow as the silver bells on his boots. She dropped her eyes, hiding the storm within. "Of course, madre, if you believe it best." The older woman reached for Isabel's hand, squeezing it with a force that belied her elegant composure. "You are a good daughter. I know you will do what must be done." A silence settled between them, the kind that grows thick with unspoken hopes and fears. Isabel longed to speak of the yearning she felt for something more, the hunger for a life unbound by duty. But such words were dangerous, and so she bit them back, returning to her needlework with trembling resolve. Outside, the world stretched sunlit and indifferent, the city of Madrid visible in the hazy distance. In its heart, a different drama unfolded. Alejandro Ferrer stood before the polished glass of his father's study, his reflection sharp, his eyes shadowed with defiance. He straightened his cravat, hand steady, though his pulse beat wild beneath his skin. His father's words still echoed. "You must remember your place, Alejandro. The salons of the nobility are not for the likes of us." Alejandro smiled, a wry twist of rebellion. "Perhaps they are not, but I intend to see for myself." That evening, the Ferrer carriage rolled past gaslit boulevards, Alejandro's heart thrumming as he entered the grand salon on the Calle de Alcalá. Chandeliers blazed overhead, casting rainbows on gowns and jewels, the air thick with perfume and intrigue. He moved among the guests, his bearing quiet, observant, his presence noted, if not entirely welcome. Across the room, Isabel stood at her mother's side, her face a mask of serene obedience. Yet when her eyes strayed from the endless parade of familiar faces, they found Alejandro. For a moment, the world narrowed, a single heartbeat, suspended in amber. His gaze caught hers, steady and unreadable, something electric sparking in the space between. Isabel's breath caught, the embroidery forgotten in her lap. Alejandro inclined his head, the ghost of a smile touching his lips. In that fleeting glance, something shifted, an unspoken promise, a question left unanswered. Doña Mercedes spoke, her voice distant. "Don Rodrigo will arrive soon, my dear. Stand tall." But Isabel's thoughts were already far away, drawn toward the stranger across the room, and the wild, impossible hope that shimmered like dawn at the edge of her carefully ordered world. Unbeknownst to either, the night would change everything. Candlelight shimmered across polished marble, gilded mirrors, and the tulle skirts of 100 swirling dancers. Laughter, brittle with excitement and expectation, floated beneath the painted ceilings of the De la Torre mansion, now ablaze with life for the first time in months. Musicians bowed and plucked with earnest precision, while servants glided like ghosts among the guests, their faces careful and unreadable. The air vibrated with the unspoken knowledge that tonight was not merely a ball. It was a spectacle meant to rescue a family from the brink. Isabel stood at the top of the grand staircase, her white gown a froth of lace and pearls, her cheeks tinged with forced color. Each breath tasted of roses and anticipation. At her side, Doña Mercedes surveyed the throng with a hawk's practiced gaze, lips set in a smile that was more warning than welcome. "Remember, Isabel," she whispered, smoothing a rebellious strand of hair from her daughter's brow. "Tonight, you are not just my daughter. You are the hope of our family. Grace, poise, and obedience, these are your armor." Isabel nodded, eyes lowered, her hands tightening on her fan. The guests below seemed to blur together. Ladies in jewel-toned silks, gentlemen with stiff collars and stiffer smiles. The music swelled, and somewhere near the doors, Don Rodrigo's unmistakable profile appeared. He was tall, well-tailored, with eyes as cold as the silver buttons on his coat. He bowed to Doña Mercedes, his manner impeccable, his words clipped. "Señora, your hospitality is as legendary as your daughter's beauty." Isabel curtsied, her heart thudding like a trapped bird, and offered her hand. Don Rodrigo pressed it lightly, gaze sliding over her with polite disinterest. "You honor me, señorita." Doña Mercedes beamed, the tension in her shoulders easing. "We are grateful for your presence, Don Rodrigo." The orchestra struck up a waltz. Guests formed elegant lines, whispering approval as Don Rodrigo claimed Isabel for the first dance. His hand at her waist was formal, almost perfunctory, as they circled the gleaming floor. Isabel's lips ached from smiling, her thoughts drifting far from the music. "You will soon be mistress of this house, Isabel," Don Rodrigo murmured, voice low. "I trust you are prepared for such a responsibility." Isabel's answer was automatic. "Of course, señor." His lips twitched, the closest he came to warmth. "Excellent." They spun past the open doors to the terrace, the gardens beyond lit by lanterns, and the pale, watchful moon. The fragrance of jasmine drifted in, a fleeting promise of freedom. Isabel's gaze lingered on the shadows outside, longing for escape. Across the ballroom, Alejandro Ferrer lingered in the periphery, his presence both inconspicuous and intensely aware. He stood beside his cousin, Don Jaime, whose invitation had secured his entrance tonight. Alejandro's eyes roamed the room, absorbing every detail. The subtle snubs, the calculated laughter, the brittle beauty of a world that would never truly accept him. His gaze settled on Isabel, her movements graceful, her smile practiced. He saw the steel beneath her gentleness, the quiet desperation in her eyes as she danced with Don Rodrigo. A pang of recognition struck him. Here was another soul, bound by expectations she could never escape. Don Jaime nudged him. "You see, cousin, how these people live. All pretense and performance. Still, the wine is good, and the music better." Alejandro smiled faintly, but his focus remained on Isabel. He watched as, after the dance, she slipped away from the crowd, her steps purposeful yet unhurried, seeking solitude in the gardens. Seizing his chance, Alejandro excused himself and followed her into the fragrant night. Isabel moved beneath the arbor of climbing roses, the cool air a balm against her fevered skin. The music grew distant, muffled by the hedges. She paused beside a stone fountain, tracing the rim with her gloved fingertips, her breath finally her own. The hush of the garden pressed close, alive with the chirr of insects and the promise of secrets. A footfall behind her made her turn. Alejandro emerged from the shadows, his presence startling yet somehow expected. He bowed, a touch of irony in his gesture. "Forgive me, señorita. I did not mean to intrude." She regarded him, heart suddenly unmoored. "You are not intruding. I wished for air, away from the noise." Alejandro stepped closer, careful not to breach propriety. It is a beautiful night, yet you seem... He hesitated, searching her face. Unhappy, perhaps. Isabel looked away, her voice a whisper. One must do what is expected. Happiness is a luxury. He studied her, his expression gentle. Or perhaps it is a necessity, even for those expected to live without it. She glanced at him, the words stirring something reckless inside her. You speak as if you know. His eyes darkened. I do. My family has money, but no name. I have always been told what is not for me. Tonight I see that cages come in many forms. Their gazes locked, the air between them charged with a dangerous intimacy. For a moment, the world narrowed to the hush of the garden, the moonlight glinting in his hair, the ache of yearning in her chest. You are bold, Senor Ferrer, Isabel murmured. He smiled, a flicker of mischief. And you are braver than you know, señorita. I hope you find your freedom. A voice shattered the fragile spell. Isabel. Doña Mercedes' tone was sharp, slicing through the night. She swept into the garden, her eyes narrowing at the sight of Alejandro. Her voice was icy, the words aimed like arrows. What are you doing out here? And with this man? Isabel stiffened, guilt and fear warring in her chest. We were only speaking, Madre. Doña Mercedes glared at Alejandro, her disdain undisguised. You forget yourself, Senor Ferrer. This is not your place. He bowed, unruffled. My apologies, Senora. I will not trouble you further. He withdrew, leaving Isabel trembling in the moonlit silence. Doña Mercedes caught her daughter's arm, her grip bruising. Never let me see you with him again. The Ferrers are not our kind. Their ambition is an insult to our name. You must think of your duty, Isabel, not your whims. Isabel bowed her head, shame burning her cheeks. But inside her, something fierce and bright refused to die. The music swelled anew from the house, the night pressing in with secrets yet unspoken and fates not yet sealed. Somewhere beyond the hedges, Alejandro paused, the memory of Isabel's eyes haunting him as he melted into the shadows. Inside, the guests raised their glasses to the happy couple, oblivious to the storm that simmered just beyond the reach of candlelight. And in the heart of the garden, Isabel clung to the only truth she dared claim. For the first time, she had tasted the air beyond her cage, and there would be no forgetting it. The night, she sensed, was far from over. The days following the ball stretched thin and brittle, each one a fragile filament of routine and expectation. In the De La Torre house, the air grew heavier, thick with the scent of cut lilies and unspoken demands. Isabel moved through it like a wraith, dutiful, silent, her mind a swirl of restless longing. The memory of moonlit words in the garden haunted her every step. She could still feel Alejandro's gaze, the heat of it burning through the layers of etiquette and fear that bound her. Her mother's vigilance sharpened. Doña Mercedes watched Isabel with hawkish eyes, noting every sigh, every absent-minded glance at the window. The wedding preparations advanced. Seamstresses came and went, trailing clouds of taffeta and the scent of starch. Don Rodrigo visited more frequently, his conversation as dry as the autumn wind, his compliments measured and impersonal. You must show gratitude, Isabel, Doña Mercedes would remind her, voice edged with warning. It is your duty. You are fortunate to be chosen. Isabel nodded, but inside, rebellion churned. She began to invent Aaron's delicate lies about books to be returned, ribbons to be matched, flowers to be gathered for the chapel. The world outside her home beckoned with the promise of air, movement, the hope of something unexpected. One morning, as Isabel lingered by the gate, under the pretense of waiting for the seamstress, a boy approached, a street child, no older than 12, with clever eyes and a letter pressed to his palm. From Senor Ferrer, he whispered, glancing over his shoulder. Isabel's heart skipped. She snatched the envelope and concealed it among the folds of her skirt, her fingers trembling. Later, in the sanctuary of her room, she broke the seal. Señorita de la Torre, if you would grant me the honor of your company, I will wait in the reading room of the Biblioteca Nacional at 11 on Thursday. There, among the words of others, perhaps we may speak a few of our own. A. Ferrer. Her first instinct was fear of discovery, of scandal. of the anger that would surely follow. Yet something in his restraint, his choice of a public, respectable place, emboldened her. She weighed the risk, the consequences, but every hour of stifling silence pressed her closer to the edge of defiance. On Thursday, draped in her most modest dress and accompanied by the lie of a forgotten book, Isabel slipped from the house. Her heart thundered as she crossed the city, the bustle of carriages and vendors a blur at the periphery of her thoughts. The Biblioteca Nacional loomed ahead, grand and serene, its stone steps cool beneath her trembling feet. Inside, the hush of parchment and polished wood wrapped around her. Alejandro waited in the reading room, seated at a table scattered with volumes of poetry and history. He rose as she entered, his expression a careful mix of hope and caution. "Señorita de la Torre," he greeted softly. "Thank you for coming." She lowered her eyes, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should not be here. If anyone, no one will know," he assured her. "We are only two readers among many. Please, sit." She did, folding her gloved hands in her lap. The silence between them was not awkward but electric, charged with possibility. Alejandro slid a book toward her. Cervantes, his favorite, he confessed. "Do you read for pleasure, señorita?" he asked, his tone gentle. She smiled, the tension easing just a fraction. "I read to remember there is a world beyond these walls. I dream of traveling Granada, perhaps, or even Paris." He leaned forward, earnest. "And what stops you?" She laughed, a small, sad sound. "Everything. My name, my duty, my mother's wishes. A woman's life is not her own." He nodded, understanding flickering in his eyes. "I know something of cages, though mine are different. My family's wealth buys comfort, but not respect. In the salons, I'm always the outsider." Their hands brushed as they reached for the same page. Isabel felt the shock of contact, the promise in it. Her voice trembled. "I envy your freedom, even if it is incomplete." Alejandro shook his head. "Freedom is only real if you choose it, Isabel." She startled at the use of her name, the intimacy of it. For a moment, the world shrank to just the two of them. No mothers, no obligations, only books and the fragile bridge of possibility. They spoke of dreams, of Alejandro's wish to build schools for the poor, of Isabel's longing to write her own stories. They traded favorite passages, laughed quietly at the follies of Don Quixote, their hearts beating to a rhythm neither dared name. Yet the spell was never complete. At the edge of every smile lurked the shadow of reality. Isabel's fingers twisted in her lap. "This cannot last," she whispered. "If my mother knew, if anyone saw us." Alejandro's jaw tightened, pain flickering across his face. "I would never bring shame upon you. If you wish, I will not write again." She shook her head, anguish in her eyes. "No, I wish only that things were different." A bell chimed the hour. Isabel rose, her resolve faltering. "I must go. Already I have lingered too long." Alejandro stood as well, his voice low. "Thank you for trusting me with your time." She smiled, bittersweet. "Thank you for reminding me I am alive." Outside, the sky had clouded, and Isabel hurried home, heart racing with equal parts joy and dread. She slipped through the gates just as her mother's carriage returned. Doña Mercedes' expression darkened at the sight of her daughter, cheeks flushed, hair slightly askew. "Where have you been?" she demanded. Isabel summoned the lie she had prepared. "The booksellers. I lost track of time." Doña Mercedes' eyes narrowed, suspicion simmering. "You are to see Don Rodrigo tomorrow. There will be no more frivolous outings. Your reputation is not yours to squander." Isabel bowed her head, but her heart rebelled. That brief hour in the library had changed her, opened a door she could no longer close. As night fell, Isabel sat by her window, clutching the borrowed book to her chest. In the silence, she traced the memory of Alejandro's words, his touch, the sense that together, for a moment, they had escaped the world's judgment. Yet, even as hope blossomed, she felt the walls closing in. The house grew colder, her mother's vigilance sharper. The price of her longing was rising, and Isabel knew that the next step, whatever it might be, would demand more courage than she had ever dared before. The future, shrouded in uncertainty, pressed close and breathless, refusing to let her rest. The days grew oppressive with the thick, honeyed heat of late summer, and with it, the weight of Isabel's world pressed harder than ever. The Della Torre house, once a sanctuary of faded grandeur and private sorrows, now felt like a gilded cage whose bars were drawing ever closer. Rumors, like a fever, had begun to seep through the cracks of Madrid's polite society whispers that clung to doorways and fluttered from fan to fan at every gathering. It was Isabel's name that laced the gossip, paired dangerously with that of Alejandro Ferrer. Servants glanced sideways, friends offered brittle smiles. Doña Mercedes, always attentive to the shifting winds of reputation, felt each murmur like a knife. She redoubled her vigilance, her instructions to Isabel sharp and unyielding, her own composure stretched thin as spun glass. Within these walls, Don Rodrigo moved with growing certainty, a man who believed himself already victorious. His visits became a daily ritual. He strode through the house as if inspecting his future domain, pausing to admire the portraits, lingering too long in Isabel's presence. At first, his attentions had been formal, even perfunctory. Now they edged into the territory of entitlement. One afternoon, Isabel sat in the parlor, pretending to read as the clock chimed the hour. Doña Mercedes and Don Rodrigo entered, their voices a low murmur. Don Rodrigo's gaze swept the room before settling upon her. "Señorita Isabel," he intoned, bowing with the grace of habit rather than feeling. "I trust you are well today." Isabel looked up, offering the requisite polite smile. "Quite well, thank you, señor." He approached, a bouquet of hothouse roses in hand. "I have brought these for you. Their beauty reminded me of you, rare, precious, and soon to be mine." She accepted the flowers with trembling hands, unsure how to respond to his boldness. "You are most kind." He leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Kindness is only a fraction of what I am prepared to offer. You must know that my intentions are serious. It is time you gave me your formal answer. Our families expect it." Isabel's heart thudded in her chest. She cast a glance at her mother, whose expression was unreadable, save for the warning glint in her eyes. "Señor, I am honored by your proposal," Isabel began, her voice measured. "But," he interrupted, impatience flickering across his features. "No more delays, Isabel. The city talks. You must show them your loyalty to our name." Isabel recoiled inwardly, but kept her composure. "I need time. This is not a matter for haste." Don Rodrigo's mouth set in a thin line, but he said nothing more, only bowing stiffly and withdrawing to speak with Doña Mercedes in urgent tones. The tension did not abate. If anything, it worsened. The rumors gained momentum, spurred on by the sharp tongues of those who had witnessed Isabel's discreet absences, the way her eyes seemed to search the crowd at every gathering. The name Ferrer, once merely a curiosity in noble circles, became a specter, an accusation. One morning, Isabel found herself cornered by her mother in the sitting room, the shutters closed against the harsh sunlight. Doña Mercedes' expression was one of cold fury. "Isabel, you are to have no further contact with the Ferrer family. None. Do you understand me?" Isabel's throat tightened. "Madre, please. You have brought shame upon this house with your foolishness." Doña Mercedes hissed, her voice trembling. "Do you know what they say? That you meet him in secret, that you have given your heart to a man beneath your station. I will not allow it. I will not see the De la Torre name dragged through the mud by a merchant's son." Isabel's hands knotted in her skirts, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "He is not what they say. I do not care what he is. You will marry Don Rodrigo and restore our honor. If I hear of so much as a letter, a word, I will send you to the convent. Is that clear?" The threat hung in the air, icy and irrevocable. Isabel bowed her head, defeated, her spirit battered by the collision of love and duty. Outside, Alejandro walked the city streets, his mind a tempest of hope and humiliation. News of the rumors had reached him too first as a whisper, then as a stinging truth. He saw how the shopkeepers stared, How acquaintances offered condolences with barely concealed satisfaction. He knew his name was being wielded as a weapon against Isabel, and the knowledge was a wound that would not heal. Don Jaime, ever the loyal cousin, found him at a cafe one afternoon and sat down heavily. The De la Torre house is in an uproar, Jaime said. Mercedes has forbidden Isabel from seeing you. Don Rodrigo grows bolder by the hour. He will not rest until he has both her and your reputation in ruins. Alejandro's jaw clenched. Let him try. Jaime studied him with concern. You care for her, truly? Alejandro's voice was steady, though pain flickered in his eyes. I love her. I would give up everything to see her free. Jaime sighed. Then you must fight, Alejandro, for her, for yourself. But you must be clever. Don Rodrigo is not a man to cross lightly. At the De la Torre house, Don Rodrigo's confidence swelled with each passing day. He took every opportunity to parade his connection to Isabel, speaking loudly at dinners, making a show of offering his arm as they strolled through the gardens. Behind closed doors, he pressed Doña Mercedes for a date, a public announcement, a binding promise. Your daughter's reluctance is troubling, he told her one evening, eyes narrowed. I hope you have impressed upon her the consequences of disobedience. She will do as she must, Doña Mercedes replied, though her voice wavered. The engagement will be formalized soon. Unbeknownst to them, Don Rodrigo was also busy beyond the family's walls. He began to cultivate alliances among the city's elite, whispering insinuations about the Ferrer family's origins and ambitions. At the gentlemen's club, he let slip dark hints about Alejandro's character, his supposed recklessness, his unseemly interest in Isabel. I have it on good authority, he said to a group of listeners, that Ferrer seeks to marry above his station for wealth and influence. The man is a wolf in borrowed clothing. The word spread swiftly, poisoning what little goodwill Alejandro's family had built. Invitations dried up. Shopkeepers hesitated to extend credit. The Ferrer name became synonymous with social climbing and scandal. Alejandro felt the sting of it, but remained defiant. He drafted a letter to Isabel carefully worded, full of longing and resolve. He entrusted it to Don Jaime, who managed to slip it to Isabel through a sympathetic servant. Dearest Isabel, do not believe what they say. My feelings for you are true, and I will not surrender to the malice of those who would keep us apart. If you wish for me to stop, I will obey. But if there is hope, any hope, I will fight for you, no matter the cost. Yours, A. The letter was a balm to Isabel's wounded heart. She read it in the secrecy of her chamber, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. The longing in Alejandro's words echoed her own, but so too did the fear. She knew her mother watched her every movement. Even a glance from the window risked discovery. Still, the words gave her strength. The next time Don Rodrigo pressed her for an answer, she met his gaze with quiet resistance. I cannot give you what you want, she said, her voice steady for the first time. My heart is not my own to offer. Don Rodrigo's face darkened. You will regret this, Isabel. I promise you that. He left in a fury, the slam of the door reverberating through the house. Doña Mercedes found Isabel moments later, her expression torn between anger and fear. You are destroying us, her mother whispered. You must yield. Isabel looked at her, eyes shining. I'm sorry, Madre. I cannot. That night, Alejandro paced his study, the letter from Isabel clutched in his hand. It contained only a single line. I will not forget you. Hope flickered in his chest, fragile but alive. He turned to Don Jaime, who watched him from the doorway. I must find a way, Alejandro said. I will not let Don Rodrigo win. Jaime nodded. Then we shall find allies. There are some who do not fear the De la Torre name or Rodrigo's threats. As the city's gossip reached a fever pitch, Isabel found herself increasingly isolated. Even her closest friends grew distant, wary of association. Her world shrank to the confines of her home and the echo of Alejandro's words in her memory. But inside her, defiance grew. She began to speak less of her dreams and more of her will. She watched her mother and Don Rodrigo with new eyes, seeing their desperation for what it was, a fear of losing control, not of losing her. One afternoon, as the sky threatened rain, Isabel retreated to the old library. She traced her fingers along the spines of books, recalling the freedom of her meeting with Alejandro. Tears welled in her eyes, but she brushed them away. There was still hope, she told herself. There had to be. Downstairs, Doña Mercedes conferred with Don Rodrigo in hushed, urgent tones. "We must act quickly," he insisted. "The scandal grows. The only solution is to announce the engagement and marry as soon as possible. Once she is my wife, all this will be forgotten." Doña Mercedes hesitated, torn between maternal fear and the cold logic of survival. "If she refuses?" she asked. Don Rodrigo's eyes narrowed, his voice hard. "She will not refuse, I will make certain of it. And Ferrer, he will regret ever daring to reach above his station." Outside, thunder rumbled, and the first drops of rain struck the windows. Isabel pressed her palm to the glass, watching the world blur. Somewhere beyond the storm, she knew Alejandro was waiting, refusing to yield. As the shadows lengthened and the city held its breath, the battle lines were drawn. Love, duty, pride, and ambition, each poised to strike. And in the gathering darkness, Isabel made a silent vow. She would not surrender her heart, no matter the cost. The storm was coming, and nothing would ever be the same again. A heavy, suffocating silence settled over the De la Torre household, broken only by the measured tread of servants and the staccato snap of Doña Mercedes's orders. The windows, once thrown open to the sun and breeze, were now shuttered. Letters were intercepted, visitors turned away. Isabel's world had shrunk to the dim, gilded prison of her own home. It was not only her freedom that had vanished, but the small dignities of her daily life. No more morning walks along the garden paths, no more solitary visits to the chapel, no more whispered exchanges with sympathetic shopkeepers. Her mother watched over her ceaselessly, her presence looming like a shadow in every room. "You have disgraced us enough," Doña Mercedes announced one morning, her voice as cold and sharp as frost. "You will not leave this house until you remember your duty. I will not see our name dragged further through the mud by your foolishness." Isabel, pale but resolute, met her mother's gaze without flinching. "You cannot keep me a prisoner forever." "I can and I will if you force my hand." The threat was not idle. Servants were instructed to report Isabel's every movement. Her father, Don Ramon, remained silent, his authority eroded by years of disappointment and pride. Isabel's only solace was her small attic room and the steady loyalty of Ana, the housemaid who had known her since childhood. It was Ana who found Isabel that afternoon, curled on her narrow bed, eyes swollen from weeping. "Señorita," Ana whispered, glancing over her shoulder before shutting the door. "What can I do?" "I cannot bear to see you so." Isabel seized her hand with desperate hope. "Ana, I beg you, will you help me? Will you carry a letter to Señor Ferrer? I cannot breathe in here. I must know what he feels. I must tell him what is in my heart." Ana hesitated only a moment before nodding. "Of course, Nina. I would do anything for you. Give me your words and I will deliver them." With trembling hands, Isabel penned her letter by the flickering light of a single candle. "Alejandro, each day without you is a day lived half awake. I'm watched, caged, denied even the comfort of hope. But I will not surrender my heart. Tell me you have not forgotten. Tell me there is still a way. Yours always, Isabel." Ana tucked the letter into her apron and, with a conspiratorial wink, vanished down the servants' stair. Isabel waited, every heartbeat a prayer. Alejandro received the letter at dusk, delivered by Ana's careful hand at the back gate of his family's house. He pressed it to his lips, relief and longing mingling in his chest. At once he replied, his script bold and urgent. "My beloved Isabel, I live for your words. I have not forgotten, nor will I ever. Let us not be defeated by their walls. Ana is brave. Through her we will speak. Meet me if you can. The old church on Calle Mayor, at the hour of vespers. Hope is not yet lost. All my love, Alejandro." So began the secret exchange letters, passed in flour sacks and hidden beneath loose stones in the garden wall. Each note was a lifeline, their passions and fears inked in hurried lines. Through Ana's unwavering loyalty, They planned their clandestine meetings. The old church, with its echoing arches and musty air, became their sanctuary. On the first evening, Isabel slipped from the house under the guise of confession, her heart pounding as she entered the dim nave. Alejandro stood waiting in the shadows near a side altar, his face alight with desperate joy. For a few stolen minutes, words poured from them, hopes, dreams, sorrow. "I'm watched like a criminal," Isabel whispered. "My mother has barred every door. I fear I will never be free." Alejandro took her hand, his touch warm and grounding. "They cannot imprison your heart. I will fight for you, Isabel. I swear it." Tears shimmered in her eyes. "We have so little time. What if they find out?" He squeezed her fingers. "Then we will write and wait and hope. I will not let Don Rodrigo win. You are not alone." Their voices faded into the hush of the empty church, the stones bearing witness to their secret. Outside the confines of their hidden world, the city teemed with rumor and judgment. Don Rodrigo's campaign to discredit Alejandro intensified. His allies in the salons spread tales of Ferrer arrogance and Isabel's supposed indiscretions. Don Ramon, stung by the slights to his name, withdrew further into himself, his disappointment a silent poison at every family meal. It was Alejandro's decision to appeal directly to Don Ramon that marked a turning point. One stormy afternoon, he arrived at the De la Torre gates, hat in hand, his suit immaculate despite the rain. The butler, wary, led him to Don Ramon's study. The elder De la Torre sat behind a desk cluttered with unpaid bills and faded ledgers. His gaze was cold and appraising as Alejandro entered. "To what do I owe this visit, Señor Ferrer?" Don Ramon's tone was clipped, his disdain palpable. Alejandro straightened, his determination clear. "I have come to ask for your daughter's hand. My feelings are genuine. I wish to make her happy, to honor her and your family." Don Ramon's laugh was bitter. "Honor? Do not speak to me of honor. You are a tradesman's son. You have money, yes, but you lack the blood. What makes you think you are worthy of a De la Torre?" Alejandro's eyes flashed. "I may lack a title, but I have integrity. I offer Isabel my respect, my devotion." "Is that not what matters most?" The older man shook his head. "You know nothing of what matters. You will not see her again. If you persist, you will bring only ruin upon her." Alejandro's jaw tightened. "I will not give up. I love her." Don Ramon rose, his voice thunderous. "Get out. If you truly cared for her, you would leave her to her duty. Our family does not need your charity." Alejandro left, anger and sorrow swirling within him. The rejection was absolute. The door slammed shut behind him. That night, Isabel read Alejandro's letter describing the encounter, her own anger flaring. "They do not see me," she wrote in reply. "They see only their pride, their fears, but I am still here. I am still yours." Anna, steadfast and brave, ferried their words beneath the noses of those who would keep them apart. She offered comfort when Isabel's hope faltered, whispered encouragement in the darkness. "You are stronger than they know, Nina," Anna murmured, as she tucked Isabel into bed one anxious night. "Love is never a shame. Do not let them break you." Days passed. The restrictions grew tighter. Isabel's mother shadowed her every step. Don Rodrigo's presence loomed, and Don Ramon's silence deepened. Yet the chain of secret letters held, and in their stolen meetings at the church, Isabel and Alejandro clung to each other all the more fiercely. One evening, as the bells tolled and rain fell in silver sheets, Isabel pressed her forehead to Alejandro's shoulder in the darkened pew. "I'm afraid," she whispered, "afraid there is no way out." Alejandro stroked her hair, his own voice rough with longing. "We will find a way. I swear it, Isabel. I will not let them take you from me." She nodded, her resolve rekindled by his certainty, even as the storm outside raged ever harder. The world beyond their sanctuary seemed determined to crush them, but in each other's arms they found the will to hope. The future was uncertain, the odds against them steep. Yet as Anna slipped another letter into Isabel's waiting hands, both young lovers knew the fight was not yet lost. Darkness pressed close around the De la Torre house, but the light of their devotion, fragile flickering, refused to be snuffed out. The next letter would be the most dangerous of all. The summer heat had not yet broken, but the fragile veneer of the De la Torre family's dignity shattered in a single afternoon. Word drifted through Madrid's golden streets, whispered behind embroidered fans and beneath the painted ceilings of salons. Isabel de la Torre's virtue was compromised. The rumor, honeyed and cruel, spread with the speed of wildfire, leaving scandal and speculation in its wake. Don Rodrigo was the architect of this poison. He had watched, lips tight, as Isabel's devotion slipped further from his grasp, and as the gossip he had sown about Alejandro. Ferrer failed to take full root. He needed something more devastating, something that would force Isabel and her family's hand. So he planted a story, carefully, insidiously, that Isabel had been seen in a compromising situation with a man not her fiancé, and that her late-night wanderings and secretive manner were proof of indiscretion. He never named Alejandro, but the city's imagination did the rest. Within days, the De la Torre house became a fortress besieged by shame. Letters of invitation were returned unopened. Old friends crossed the street to avoid Doña Mercedes at market. Don Ramon locked himself in his study, the weight of disgrace folding his once proud shoulders. Isabel, unaware at first, sensed the change as she wandered the hall's doors closed abruptly as she passed, servants avoiding her gaze, Anna's face pale with worry. The air grew colder, the house smaller, until at last the truth broke over her like a wave. Doña Mercedes burst into Isabel's chamber, her eyes wild, a crumpled letter trembling in her fist. "Do you see what you have done?" she cried, voice raw. "Do you see how you have ruined us?" Isabel, startled from her sewing, rose to face her mother. "What has happened, madre?" "Do not pretend ignorance." Doña Mercedes hurled the letter onto the bed. "The city says you are no longer pure, that you have been meeting Ferrer in secret, that you have given yourself to him. Our family's name is in the gutter. This is what comes of your stubbornness, your disobedience." Isabel's hands shook, but her voice was clear. "It is not true. I have done nothing to shame you." "Who will believe you now?" Mercedes spat. "No one. You're ruined. We are ruined. And whose fault is that?" The words stung, but Isabel lifted her chin. "I am not ruined. I have only loved where my heart led me." Mercedes staggered, stricken. "You will marry Don Rodrigo, and you will do so at once. It is the only way to repair what you have broken. He has agreed graciously to accept you still. You will thank him for saving you." Isabel's heart turned to ice. "You would sell me to the man who has done this?" Doña Mercedes' fury broke, giving way to desperation. She seized Isabel's shoulders, shaking her. "You do not understand. If you refuse, we lose everything. We will be cast out. Is that what you want? For your father to die of shame? For your sister to never marry?" Isabel wrenched herself free, her own voice rising, strong for the first time. "I will not be sacrificed for your honor. I have suffered enough. I have watched you barter my life as if I were a coin, no more. I will not marry Don Rodrigo. I would rather be ruined than belong to him." A silence, sharp as a blade, cut the air. Doña Mercedes's face crumpled, tears brimming in her eyes. "Then you are no daughter of mine." Isabel pressed her hand to her chest, breathing hard. "Then let it be so." Downstairs, the sound of raised voices echoed through the marble halls. Servants exchanged anxious glances. Anna, hovering at the door, slipped inside to comfort Isabel, who collapsed onto her bed in silent, shaking sobs. In the city, Alejandro heard the first rumors as he entered his father's office. The air was thick with tension. His father's brow furrowed as he read a note from an associate. Alejandro's heart seized as he recognized Isabel's name. "Father, what is it?" he demanded. Don Ferrer's mouth was a hard line. "Your name has been linked to the De la Torre scandal. They say that Isabel—" He stopped, unwilling to repeat the slander. Alejandro's hands curled into fists. "It is a lie. Someone is trying to destroy us." Don Ferrer looked away. "You must be careful, Alejandro. This is not just about love now. This is about war. The De la Torre house is desperate. And Don Rodrigo, he will not stop until you are destroyed." Alejandro's mind raced. The image of Isabel, proud and luminous, rose before him. He could not bear to think of her suffering alone. He sought out Don Jaime that night, confiding in him as the city's lamps flickered in the darkness. "I cannot let them do this to her," Alejandro said. "She does not deserve it. I must act. I must see her." Jaime nodded, his loyalty unwavering. "You must be careful, cousin. They will expect you. The De La Torre house is a trap now. One false step, and you will lose everything." "I would risk anything," Alejandro replied, "for her." Meanwhile, in her locked chamber, Isabel penned a letter to Alejandro, her words trembling with anger and grief. "Alejandro, they have destroyed me with lies. My own mother demands I surrender. But I will not. I cannot. I am frightened, but my heart is strong. If you believe in me, do not let them win. Do not let them silence us. Yours always, Isabel Ana, ever faithful. Risk discovery to deliver the message." Alejandro read it by candlelight, rage and love warring within him. He wrote back, "Isabel, they cannot touch what is true. I will not be silent. I will come for you. Hold on. I will not rest until you are free. All my love, Alejandro." The city seethed with speculation. In drawing rooms and taverns, the story grew. Isabel, the fallen angel. Ferrer, the seducer. Don Rodrigo, the noble savior. The gossip reached a fever pitch. Even Don Ramon, rarely leaving his study, summoned Isabel to his side. He looked old, defeated. "If you have any sense of duty left," he said quietly, "you will do as your mother asks. This is not about love, Isabel. This is about survival." She knelt before him, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Father, do you believe I am guilty?" He hesitated, then looked away. "It does not matter what I believe. It matters what they believe." She rose, dignity intact. "Then I have nothing left to lose." That night, Doña Mercedes confronted Isabel a final time. "You will dress. You will accept Don Rodrigo's proposal before witnesses. If not, you will be turned out. Is that clear?" Isabel met her mother's gaze, her own steady as steel. "I will not. I am not yours to sell." Doña Mercedes slapped her, the sound echoing in the silence. "Ungrateful girl, you have destroyed us all." Isabel's cheek burned, but she did not cry. "No, madre, you destroyed me first." Downstairs, Don Rodrigo arrived with a triumphant air, expecting a broken girl ready to submit. Instead, he found Isabel standing at the top of the stairs, back straight, eyes blazing. "I will not marry you, Don Rodrigo," she declared, her voice ringing through the house. "You may have slandered me, but you will never have me." He reddened, caught off guard by her defiance. "You are a fool, Isabel. No one will have you now." She smiled, bitter and proud. "Then I am free at last." As the household descended into chaos, servants whispering, Mercedes sobbing, Don Ramon slumped in his chair, Ana slipped away to find Alejandro, relaying the events in frantic whispers. Alejandro's resolve hardened. He donned his coat, bracing himself for the fight ahead. He would not let Isabel stand alone against the world. He would confront Don Rodrigo, challenge the lie, and claim the love that had cost them both so dearly. Outside, thunder rumbled, as if the heavens themselves echoed the storm within the De La Torre house. But in Isabel's heart, a new courage had taken root, a refusal to bend, no matter the cost. And as Alejandro strode into the night, a single question burned in both their hearts. Would love be enough to conquer the ruin that surrounded them? Or would the world's cruelty prove stronger than hope? The dawn would bring answers neither dared imagine. The city of Madrid bristled with the fever of scandal. But for Alejandro Ferrer, each whispered word was a blade driving him to action. He would not let Isabel's name be dragged through the mud by Don Rodrigo's malice. He would not stand idle while the woman he loved was pressed toward ruin. He gathered his allies with quiet urgency. Don Jaime, his cousin, with connections in the city's press. Señorita Clara, a sharp-tongued heiress with debts of gratitude to Alejandro. And most crucial of all, Ana, the loyal maid who risked everything for her mistress. They met in shadowed corners and quiet rooms, a clandestine council united by outrage and hope. Alejandro's voice was low and determined as he outlined the plan. We need proof witnesses, letters, anything that reveals Don Rodrigo's hand in this. If we can bring the truth to Don Ramon, perhaps he will see where true honor lies. Ana nodded, her eyes fierce. The housekeeper overheard Don Rodrigo speaking with a servant about the rumors. I will try to find her. And there are letters in Don Rodrigo's hand, sent to a gossip monger. I have seen the seal. Don Jaime leaned forward. If we can get those letters, I can see them published or better, placed in the hands of Don Ramon himself. Alejandro's heart beat faster. It must be done quickly. Every day Isabel suffers more. Ana returned to the De la Torre house quiet and unseen. She whispered words of comfort to Isabel, who now walked the halls like a ghost, her face pale but her eyes burning with resolve. In stolen moments, Ana pressed her hand, passing secret notes and updates from Alejandro. Hold on, Niña, she murmured in the darkness of Isabel's chamber. He is fighting for you. But within the household, the atmosphere had grown toxic. Doña Mercedes clung to her campaign of control, her anger sharpened by humiliation. She watched Isabel relentlessly, her words cold as marble. You will do as you are told, she insisted, or you will destroy us all. Isabel stood her ground. It is already destroyed. I will not marry Don Rodrigo. Mercedes' voice trembled. You do not understand. Without this match, we are nothing. Then I would rather be nothing, Isabel replied, than be his property. Outside, Ana worked her magic. She coaxed the housekeeper, Señora Pilar, into confession over a pot of tea. The old woman's hands shook as she recounted what she had heard. He said it was only a matter of time before the city believed his story, Pilar whispered. He laughed, Ana. He said the De la Torre girl would crawl to him in gratitude. Ana pressed her for details, then hurried to Alejandro with the news. Together, they devised a way to retrieve the letters. Clara, using her social standing, arranged for Don Rodrigo's servant to deliver a bundle of correspondence to her, claiming it was for a mutual friend. Within the bundle, Ana and Alejandro found two damning letters, one instructing a notorious gossip to spread the tale of Isabel's indiscretion, and another boasting, the Ferrer boy will be ruined by her shame. Don Jaime took the evidence to Don Ramon, arranging a private meeting under the pretense of settling a debt. He placed the letters on the desk, his voice grave. Read them, Don Ramon. See who truly seeks your ruin. Don Ramon's hands shook as he scanned the pages, his face drained of color, then flushed with anger and confusion. This cannot be, he muttered. Rodrigo, he is to be my son-in-law. Jaime's gaze was steady. He is your enemy, sir. He has destroyed your daughter's reputation for his own gain. Don Ramon paced the study, wrestling with the truth. Years of pride and tradition weighed against the evidence before him. At last, he sank into his chair, hands covering his face. In the salon, Doña Mercedes waited anxiously, her composure unraveling with each passing hour. When Don Ramon entered, letters trembling in his grip, she rose at once. What is it? She demanded. Have you spoken to Rodrigo? He fixed her with a haunted stare. These came to me today. Letters from Rodrigo prove that he orchestrated the rumors about Isabel. Mercedes snatched the pages, her eyes darting across the lines. No, it cannot be. He would never. He has, Don Ramon said, voice broken. He has betrayed us all. Mercedes' anger flared. This is a trick. Rodrigo is our only hope. We must not turn against him. Don Ramon's voice grew cold. Our only hope. At what cost, Mercedes? Our daughter's happiness? Her very soul? She stiffened, refusing to yield. What matters is survival. Reputation is all we have left. Reputation built on lies, he spat. I will not force Isabel into this marriage. But Mercedes was unmoved, her pride an iron wall. You are weak, Ramon. If you will not protect us, I will. The argument spilled into the corridor, voices rising, servants scattering in alarm. Isabel listened from the shadows, her pulse quickening as hope flickered anew. That evening, as the household simmered with tension, Isabel found her mother in the dim light of the drawing room. She stood tall, voice steady. Madre, I will not marry Don Rodrigo. If you force me, I will run away. I swear it. I will leave this house and never return. Mercedes' eyes narrowed, her mouth twisting with disbelief and fear. You would abandon your family? You would bring us such disgrace? Isabel's eyes filled with tears, but her resolve did not waver. You have left me no choice. I would rather live in poverty, free, than spend one more day as a pawn in your game. Mercedes advanced on her, desperation in every line. You are a foolish child. You know nothing of the world. I know what love is, Isabel replied, and I know what it means to be used. Their words collided in the charged air, neither willing to yield. At last, Mercedes collapsed onto a settee, her sobs muffled by her hands. Isabel watched her, grief and pity mingling in her heart. Upstairs, Don Ramon lingered over the letters, the weight of years pressing on his shoulders. When Isabel entered, he looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. Papa, she whispered, do you believe me now? He nodded slowly. I do, Isabel, I do. I'm sorry it took so long. She knelt beside him, taking his hand. Then help me, please. He squeezed her fingers, the gesture an unspoken promise. Outside, Alejandro waited, restless and determined, his allies close at hand. Anna slipped away to deliver news of the day's victories and the household's growing fractures. There is hope, she whispered, but you must be ready. They will not yield easily. Alejandro drew a steadying breath. I am ready. For her, I will face anything. As night fell, the De La Torre mansion trembled with uncertainty. Old loyalties crumbled. New alliances formed in the shadows. Doña Mercedes clung to the wreckage of her pride. Don Ramon teetered on the edge of change. And in her chamber, Isabel, heart-pounding, watched the moon rise and wondered if, at last, her dawn would come. Yet the battle was not over. In the darkness, Don Rodrigo plotted his next move, and the fate of a family and a love hung in the balance. The hours ahead would demand everything Isabel possessed: courage, resolve, and the willingness to risk all for the promise of freedom. The city thrummed with anticipation, as if Madrid itself held its breath. Invitations had gone out for the grand ball at the Palacio de los Mendoza, an event promising silk and diamonds. But beneath the glitter, a current of rumor and suspicion. The De La Torre name, recently battered, was on every tongue. Some whispered of disgrace, others of innocence. All eyes watched, hungry for drama. Inside the palace, Isabel moved like a wraith in blue silk, chin high, eyes steady. She felt the weight of every glance and every whispered word. But tonight, something electric burned within her, a hope both fragile and fierce. She had heard, through Anna's urgent whispers, that proof against Don Rodrigo was now in Don Ramon's hands. Alejandro's allies had worked in the shadows, their efforts culminating in this very night, a night that could change everything. Don Rodrigo arrived late, resplendent in a midnight coat, the image of aristocratic ease. He moved through the crowd, smiling, shaking hands, a predator certain of his power. But there was a tightness to his jaw, a flicker of unease behind his eyes. He had heard the rumors too, that letters in his own hand were circulating, that Don Ramon's trust was shaken. As the orchestra played and guests whirled beneath chandeliers, Alejandro entered, flanked by Don Jaime and Clara. His gaze found Isabel across the room, their eyes meeting for a brief, luminous moment. Isabel's heart skipped, hope fluttering anew. She saw in his expression not only love, but resolve. The hour of reckoning came swiftly. Don Ramon, grave and composed, approached the center of the hall. His voice, though weary, carried authority. Ladies and gentlemen, I beg your attention. The music faded, conversation stilled. Don Ramon turned to Don Rodrigo, who stood at his side with a brittle smile. I have here, Don Ramon announced, letters in Don Rodrigo's own hand, which reveal the origin of the slander against my daughter. These are not the words of a gentleman, but of a man who would destroy a woman's reputation for his own gain. A gasp swept the crowd. All eyes shifted to Don Rodrigo, who paled, then flushed, then tried to speak. This is an outrage, he began. But Don Jaime stepped forward, voice cutting and clear. You deny it? The letters bear your seal. The housekeeper heard you boast of your scheme. Whispers rose like a storm. Don Rodrigo's mask crumbled. He stammered, searching for allies, but found only cold stares and turned backs. One by one, the city's elite withdrew their support. His humiliation was absolute. In a final desperate gesture, Don Rodrigo tried to address Isabel. "Señorita, you must believe." She met his gaze, unflinching. "I believe only in the truth, Don Rodrigo. And tonight, you have been revealed for what you are." He faltered, then fled the room, the crowd parting in silence. The door slammed behind him, echoing like a sentence passed. The scandal broke like a summer storm. Guests hurried to share what they had witnessed. The rumor that had nearly destroyed Isabel evaporated in the bright glare of truth. The Della Torre name, while spared total ruin, would never be as revered, but Isabel's innocence was restored. In the aftermath, Doña Mercedes was inconsolable. She locked herself in her bedroom, refusing food, company, even the pleas of her daughters. When Isabel knocked, Mercedes would not answer. "She will not forgive me," Isabel told Anna, voice trembling. "No matter what is proven, I am lost to her." Anna stroked her hair, whispering, "You have survived worse. You have your father's ear, you have your own strength." Don Ramon, shaken to the core, sought solace in his study. Alejandro found him there the next morning, hat in hand, dignity undiminished by humility. "I owe you an apology," Don Ramon began, his voice rough. "You acted with honor when I did not." Alejandro bowed his head. "I did only what I must, sir, for Isabel." The old man studied him for a long moment. "My daughter's happiness. It is worth more than pride. If you love her truly, do not let her suffer further." Alejandro nodded, hope flooding his chest. "I will not." Meanwhile, Isabel wandered the gardens, the dawn light painting her face in gentle gold. She felt exhausted, battered, but free in a way she had never known. When Alejandro appeared at the gate, breathless and uncertain, she ran to him without hesitation. They met beneath the old lime tree, the city's noise muffled by the hush of new morning. He took her hands, and for a moment neither spoke, simply breathing each other in, alive and unbroken. At last Isabel smiled, tears glittering in her eyes. "I thought I had lost you." Alejandro brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. "Nothing could keep me from you. Not lies, not scandal, not the world itself." She pressed her forehead to his, their fingers entwined. "What now?" He laughed softly. "Now we hope. Now we build something new. There will be obstacles, your mother, the city, the past. But together." She nodded. "Together. I am not afraid." They sat in the shade, voices low and tender, dreaming aloud of a life not yet certain. The pain was not forgotten, nor the wounds fully healed. But in each other's arms, Isabel and Alejandro found the promise of a future shaped by their own choosing. Back at the house, Doña Mercedes mourned the life she had tried to salvage, while Don Ramon, moved by his daughter's courage and Alejandro's integrity, began to consider a world where love might matter more than lineage. And as the city's gossip turned, for once, to tales of justice and hope, Isabel and Alejandro faced the uncertain road ahead, undaunted, hearts alight with the knowledge that the worst was behind them, and the rest of their story still unwritten. The summer scandal had faded, its echoes softened by new gossip and the relentless turning of Madrid's social wheel. Yet within the De la Torre house, peace remained elusive. The family's reputation, though no longer shredded, was now merely threadbare, and beneath the fragile calm, old wounds festered. Doña Mercedes, once a force of will, was now shadowed by illness and disappointment. The strain of humiliation and the collapse of her ambitions had taken their toll. Her days were spent in a dim upstairs chamber, curtains drawn against the sun, her breathing shallow and restless. She refused visitors, speaking only to Anna, or, on rare occasions, to Isabel. Isabel moved quietly through the house, tending her mother with unwavering devotion. Each morning she brought broth and tea, smoothing Mercedes' tangled hair and reading aloud the letters that arrived from distant relatives, most filled with empty platitudes and subtle reproaches. Isabel did not shrink from the tasks of care, though the air between them was thick with unsaid words. One afternoon, as rain tapped at the window, Isabel sat by her mother's bedside, darning a handkerchief. Mercedes stared at the ceiling, her voice thin and bitter. "You are still determined to marry that man," she said without preamble. Isabel set down her needle, her tone gentle but unwavering. "Yes, madre. I love him. He has proven himself worthy." Mercedes' lips tightened. "Worthy? He is not of our world. You will find no welcome in the salons, no invitations to court." "I do not need them," Isabel answered, though her heart ached at the truth. "I only wish for your blessing." Mercedes turned away, her frailty stark against the pillows. "You wish for what cannot be." "My heart is broken, Isabel. You have chosen your happiness over your family." Isabel reached for her hand, holding it with quiet strength. "I have chosen honesty over lies. I am still your daughter." Tears glistened in Mercedes' eyes, but she said nothing more. Isabel stayed by her side until her mother drifted into uneasy sleep, then slipped from the room, sorrow and hope warring within her. Downstairs, Don Ramon's presence filled the library. Since the night of Don Rodrigo's disgrace, he had become a changed man, less proud, more contemplative, as if the collapse of old certainties had finally granted him a kind of freedom. He watched Isabel enter, her face pale with worry, and beckoned her close. "Sit with me, hija," he said softly. She obeyed, folding her hands in her lap. Don Ramon regarded her for a long moment, the lines on his face deepening. "I have thought much of what has passed, my failures as a father, my pride, the pain it has brought you. I cannot change the past, but I can choose the future." Isabel's eyes filled with cautious hope. "What are you saying, Papa?" He sighed, the sound heavy with regret and resolve. "I will not stand in the way of your happiness. If you wish to marry Alejandro Ferrer, you have my consent." Tears spilled down Isabel's cheeks, her relief uncontainable. "Thank you, Papa, thank you." He held up a hand, somber. "But you must understand what it means. Our position in society is already precarious. There will be those who turn their backs, those who whisper behind your back. You will lose invitations, privileges, perhaps even friendships you thought secure." Isabel nodded, her voice steady. "I know. I am prepared. Alejandro and I have spoken of it." Don Ramon studied her, pride and sadness mingling in his gaze. "He is an honest man, brave, too. You will have a harder life than you deserve, but perhaps a truer one." A quiet knock sounded at the door. Ana appeared, her eyes bright. "Señorita, Señor Ferrer is in the garden. He wishes to speak with you." Isabel rose, her heart racing, and hurried outside. Alejandro stood beneath the old magnolia, raindrops glistening on his shoulders. He looked up as she approached, his expression open, uncertain. She reached for his hands, her voice trembling with joy. "My father has given his blessing. We are free." He laughed, pulling her close. "I had almost lost hope." She looked up at him, serious and radiant. "It will not be easy, Alejandro. We will be outsiders in many circles. Some friends will vanish. My mother, she may never forgive me." He touched her cheek, his eyes shining with devotion. "I do not need their approval, only yours. We will build our own life, one built on truth, not pretense." She nodded, her fears easing in the warmth of his embrace. "I am ready for whatever comes." In the days that followed, the news spread quietly. Some relatives responded with polite dismay, others with cool indifference. Invitations to dinners grew scarce. A few loyal friends came to offer hugs and congratulations in private, but the world of endless salons and courtly dances was closed to them now. The De La Torre name, once a passport to every privilege, had lost its currency. Through it all, Isabel remained steadfast. She cared for her mother with patience, never ceasing to hope for a word of forgiveness, a gesture of acceptance. But Mercedes, weakened by illness and pride, remained silent, her heart locked behind old hurts. Don Ramon became Isabel's anchor, his newfound humility and warmth a balm she had never known in childhood. He and Alejandro found common ground, speaking of business, politics, and the future with mutual respect. Alejandro, for his part, moved forward with quiet determination. He arranged for a modest but elegant home, never asking Isabel to compromise her values. He promised her not a palace, but a partnership, one where every sacrifice would be shared. In the twilight of a long summer's day, Isabel and Alejandro walked through the nearly deserted park, their hands entwined. The city's judgment no longer frightened her. Its approval no longer mattered. They spoke of dreams and plans, laughter blooming amidst the uncertainty. "Do you regret it?" Alejandro asked softly, searching her face. "Not for a moment," Isabel replied. "I have lost only what was never truly mine. What I have now is real." He squeezed her hand, his own heart full of hope. As the bells of Madrid tolled in the distance, Isabel looked toward the horizon, uncertain. Yes, but no longer afraid. Their future would be hard-won, but it was theirs to claim. And in the gathering dusk, as the first stars blinked to life, the promise of a new beginning shimmered between them, fragile, precious, and entirely their own. The city awoke on the morning of Isabel's wedding with a sense of restless anticipation. Madrid's carriages rattled past the modest church, and faces pressed to lace-curtained windows, eager to witness what many called a scandal, and a few dared to whisper might be the beginning of a new era. The union of Isabel de la Torre, daughter of ancient blood, and Alejandro Ferrer, son of industry, was the subject of every breakfast table, every salon, every cautious, curious heart. Inside the bride's chamber, sunlight filtered through gauzy curtains, falling in trembling patterns across the pale blue of Isabel's gown. She had chosen simplicity. No extravagant lace, no gilded tiara, only a cluster of wildflowers in her hair, their petals trembling as if echoing her heart. Anna, steady and silent, fastened the last pearl at her wrist and pressed her hand with a wordless blessing. Isabel stood before the mirror, searching her own eyes for doubt, but finding only a fragile, determined joy. She thought of the winding path that had led her here, of secrets whispered in gardens, of letters smuggled through darkness, of tearful defiance and quiet hope. Each hardship, each loss, had been a stone in the road. Now she was ready to walk forward, hand in hand with the man she loved. A hush fell as she descended the staircase. Don Ramon, grave and proud, waited at the foot, his arm offered with a tremor of emotion he did not try to hide. "Are you ready, Hija?" he asked softly. She nodded. "More than ever, Papa." They stepped into the carriage together. Along the route to the church, Isabel glimpsed faces, some cold, some curious, some offering fleeting smiles of encouragement. At the church doors, a crowd had gathered, not all invited. The whispers began at once. "There she is, still proud, even now. Who would have thought the De la Torres would stoop to this? Look at the Ferrer boy. He holds himself well, for a merchant's son." Within the sanctuary, the pews filled with guests arranged in careful tiers, a scattering of loyal friends, a handful of distant relatives, and a multitude of society's watchers, some with arms folded in judgment, some with eyes wide in the thrill of witnessing history. At the front, Alejandro waited, his posture tense but his eyes bright with hope and longing. He turned as Isabel entered, his breath catching. She moved toward him with grace, a smile trembling on her lips. For a heartbeat, the world fell away. There was only the space between them, and the promise it contained. The priest's voice echoed in the high vaults, solemn and gentle. Marriage, in the eyes of God and society, is a union of hearts, of purpose, of hope. "Do you, Isabel de la Torre, take this man?" Her answer was clear, unwavering. "I do." "And do you, Alejandro Ferrer, take this woman?" "I do." Their vows were not extravagant, but every word rang with truth. "I will honor you, respect you, and walk beside you, whatever storms may come," Alejandro pledged, his hand steady in hers. Isabel's voice shook with feeling. "You have given me freedom, and I promise you loyalty, and courage, and all the love I possess." The priest smiled. "Then, by the grace of God, I pronounce you husband and wife." The congregation erupted in a soft, uncertain murmur. Some guests clapped hesitantly. Others simply watched, measuring the moment and what it might mean for their own world. In the second pew, Doña Mercedes sat rigid, her face pale, her gloved hands knotted tightly in her lap. She had come, compelled by love or duty or pride, but her blessing was withheld. Her eyes fixed on her daughter, with a complicated ache that spoke of both loss and longing. After the ceremony, as the crowd spilled into the sunlight, Isabel turned to her mother. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then, with tears shining in her eyes, Isabel reached for her hand. "Thank you for all that you taught me, Madre," she said softly. "Even if you cannot share my joy, I am grateful for your strength. I will carry it with me." Doña Mercedes' lips trembled, but she did not reply. She looked at her daughter, no longer a girl, but a woman who had chosen her own fate, and a tear traced down her cheek. Alejandro approached, taking Isabel's arm. They faced the world together, two figures at the threshold, neither wholly accepted nor entirely rejected, but unbreakable in their unity. As they walked through the church doors, the crowd parted, some murmuring with disdain, others with reluctant admiration. "They are brave," someone whispered. "Or foolish," another replied. "Perhaps both," said a third, watching as the couple stepped into the carriage, sunlight glinting off Isabel's wild flowers. Inside, Alejandro squeezed her hand. "Are you afraid?" She shook her head, laughter and tears mingling in her voice. "Not anymore. With you, I can face anything." He kissed her knuckles. "We will make our own place in this world, Isabel, whatever it costs." As the carriage rolled away, Isabel looked back once, catching her mother's silhouette in the doorway, still and silent. Her heart ached for what might never be, but it was filled too with gratitude for the lessons of resilience, for the courage to choose love. The city watched as they disappeared into the golden afternoon, a symbol of change in a world that feared it. And though the future was uncertain, Isabel and Alejandro rode forward together, undaunted, unbowed, and ready to build a life that was entirely their own.